can you keep a secret?
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Welcome to Change Your POV podcast. You're listening to Changing Hearts and Minds, a show about reviving the warrior spirit and remembering the past to improve our future. I'm your host, Jeff Adamick. Let's get this party started.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I totally screwed or what? You're funny.
I want to discuss all this behavior.
Let me out of here!
Hey everybody, welcome to an episode of Changing Hearts and Minds. I am your host, Jeff Adamick. I just coming off of that 11-episode Lessons in Leadership special series I did with the Band of Brothers show and the book, and having Dale Dye and all those guys come on the show and be on with me was quite a good time. I really enjoyed it. But now it's back to business. It's back to doing what I do best, which is bringing you guys the information that really matters for transitioning soldiers. Today on my episode, I've got a really I'm excited to have this guest on. I've known about this gentleman in the place where I live at. He's well known around here as a guy that's got a lot of character, a lot of good things that are said about this gentleman, and so I'm glad to have him on. He does a lot of great things for guys in not just in the special operations community, but guys in the military overall who are getting out and dealing with transition and dealing with coming off of injuries and a lot of stuff that we don't understand. This guy is well known to myself and to my frequent guest, Jeff Dardia, who comes on all the time. We have Josh Collins coming on the show today. Josh, welcome to the show, brother.
Jeff, man, I am honored to be here. Thank you.
For those of you those of my listeners who don't know you, which I don't think there'll be very many, but we will get this out to some people who don't. But give us a little bit of background on who's Josh Collins and what was your trip like through the military?
Oh, that's here's the Reader's Digest version. The only thing that counts. So I started in the 82nd and spent a few years there. I went to selection very very early on in my career for Delta. Made it. I spent about 7-8 years there as an enlisted guy. Lost my mind and decided I'd go to OCS. I was an E7P and literally could have pinned on E8 while I was in OCS. And it was a terrible day. And I went to 1st Ranger Battalion as a 2nd lieutenant and I spent about 4 years there and then went back to the unit and I retired in 2008.
Quite a journey for you. I know that a lot of the guys out there will hear Josh has selection, and you've heard me talk about selection. Just so we're clear, we are both members of the Special Forces community, although the selection processes that me and him both talk about are different processes, and they are for different units. And that's about as much as I will go in offhand on Josh's background. But he, like I said, he is well known around the community by myself and other guys, and we're happy to have you on, brother, and happy to give you an opportunity to talk about the stuff that you're doing now, which is phenomenal.
Well, like I said, I'm very honored to be on your show and love what you're doing in terms of getting the message out, and it's huge.
Well, I appreciate that. So the one thing that I noticed just in the research of getting everything cleared up is how similar both of our conditions, injury wise, were similar. Both of us had TBIs. The vestibular one was the one because there's not too many guys I run into who had vestibular problems and had to go through vestibular rehab, which so the folks at home understand, vestibular problems are generally inner ear malfunctions that cause us to have an inability to maintain balance in space. And so you guys understand that when I came home with my traumatic brain injury, I went through all the different stuff. I get home, and for the first day that I could stand up because of my back being broken and take a shower, I was standing in the shower. I went to close my eyes to wash my hair and immediately fell through the shower curtain into the floor. And so with vestibular problems, when you close your eyes, when you don't have vestibular function, what causes your body to do is the balance that you naturally feel as a human being because of your inner ear function is gone. So when you close your eyes, you'll lose that balance completely. You won't even feel yourself falling over till you hit something. And so that's pretty bad. And I know that, Josh, you've had surgery and stuff to help you with yours. So yours is a little bit more severe than mine, but I'll understand the therapy that we both went through, like walking down hallways with playing cards in front of us, going back and forth and spending hours nauseated and vomiting. Talk to us a little bit about your what led to your TBI to get worse over and over again. I know that you've had multiple TBIs and stuff like that. So
right. So I had a total of 7 while I was in the service, and those were kind of a combination of a couple were from blast, and not necessarily in any shrapnel or impact, but just from getting blown up and eating that blast wave. I think 2 were from falls, like parachute landing falls, and then 1 was some combative straining. And those, I thought I was dealing with those pretty well when I got out. I was offered a medical, and I was encouraged to get a medical. As a matter of fact, I think it was a Surgeon General for USASOC at the time you wrote a letter and said, basically, this guy needs a medical. And I said, no, I don't. I'm out of here. And I was at retirement years anyway, so I said, I don't even know what that's about. I don't even understand that. A couple years later, I got another 2 TBIs, concussions, big concussions that were back to back when I was as a contractor, and I was back in those same special operations communities. And those are really it was sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back. Right. One of the things that was really, really hard, especially after I was finally hospitalized for those final 2 traumatic brain injuries, is they spent a lot of time talking about PTSD as well. And it was funny because I literally, like the neuro would say, look, you've got all these TBIs, but don't you think the majority of this is just PTSD and the anxiety, the depression, the hypervigilance, all the crazy stuff that was going on? And I'd look at her and I'd say, no, I have always, been very good at compartmentalizing things, and I never had a problem with all that other stuff until the brain injuries began to catch up with me. And then we could talk more about that, but then I started doing lots of research on like the NFL football players with traumatic brain injuries and multiple, repetitive concussive syndrome and all the crazy stuff that they're doing, and then finally killing themselves. And they sure as hell haven't been to combat, much less have PTSD, right?
Right. And for me, I went to a door kicking school for Special Forces Command, and was in the SIF unit for a couple. So I spent time, much like Jeff Doherty, as a CFAL instructor for Special Forces. So those hours and hours on the ranges doing door charges, doing hallway breaches and things like that. A lot of people don't realize that just the training alone, we get exposed to these high level blast injuries that really do damage. And like you said, with the NFL players, the kind of damage, we're wearing helmets just like they are. We're feeling impact blasts and high impact concussive traumatic hits just as much as they are. Yet we don't know about. We just feel like the next day I'll feel a little sore, but I'll get over it. And we don't really realize the long-term damage that we might be doing to our bodies. So I think that much like you, that last TBI, the one that got me sent home, that was the one that did it for me as well. And I had obviously diagnosed PTSD myself also, and I had PTSD for sure, but it didn't manifest itself until I had the TBI to really push it over the edge of not being able to, like you said, compartmentalize and to effectively deal with it, because my brain wasn't working like it normally had worked, which was the kind of brain that was able to deal with the stressors and the side effects and the hypervigilance that we all have when we come back. Everyone's a little jumpy when they first get back, and that's just learned behavior. We get that stuff happen to us, and it builds up. And so I empathize with you and understand completely, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners do as well, that how one injury can really just be the catalyst to bring a lot of other ones to a head. Even if they're not severe, they now all of a sudden become severe.
Right. And you had said, what it did to, in terms of life. Of course, there's the memory problems. There was the getting lost, the spatial awareness. Man, I would get on, I would pull into a gas station, come out, swear I needed to turn left, but then for some reason I'd go right. The GPS would be talking to me the whole time. I'll go right and drive literally mile after mile in the wrong direction. I once was close to home, drove back to Raleigh, back when I worked with some folks in Raleigh. I literally was like all the way an hour back to Raleigh. It's like now 9 o'clock at night. My wife's calling. I'm going, well, and she understood. I went the wrong way again.
Right.
Getting lost in your neighborhood. Those are horrible, terrible things. The personality stuff is definitely stuff we don't like to talk about. The anger, the impatience, the intolerance that gets extreme. Because we're frustrated, we can't handle it, and that's when I really started to think, man, this might be beyond me.
Yeah, we were gonna transition to that, but let's go into it. For me, just so we understand that when I started to realize the isolating myself from everyone else, I'd come home from work and immediately go to a room by myself and sit there for hours and just not want to be around people. And although my anger was more internalized to more of a guilt and depressive type, it manifests itself differently in all of us. And so you said that you had the anger took you over. When was like for me, it was my wife that brought it to my attention that there was something wrong. And with everyone, it's a little bit different. And I do applaud you for either self-identifying or for being man enough when someone did identify it for you to accept the fact that things were going wrong. But when did you really start to realize? How long did
that was a long process, and it wasn't me. It was folks around me. But I was making some big mistakes at work that were being noticed, and guys were talking to me. It became a little scary. That was one thing. The first thing was in my work environment. God, I love my brothers, man, and they began to try to make things a little easier for me.
Yeah, right.
And I saw what they were doing, and to like lessen the load, and that was hard. That was hard because I could see what they were doing. They were watching out for me, and at the same time, I was just like. I felt like, they were looking at this dog that needed to be put down, and I was just going, just put me down, man. Just, do what you got to do already, that was very hard. At home, of course, I had the family telling me, I've got 4 kids. They were all teenagers, older teenagers at the time. And when this all kind of really came to crisis, and I was the great Santini with all of them because of it's called perseveration. You get stuck in set. Mm-hmm. It never, so something bad happens and you resolve it and then it replays the next day like it was never, and it's horrible. It's horrible for the kids. It's horrible for your wife. Some of the big things were the sleep issues. I began to act things out at home, and look, I'm going to be very honest here, and this stuff is not pretty, and it's embarrassing, and it's tough stuff. But one night I choked my wife. She finally woke me up. I mean, I would just be so out of it. One night I punched her in the face. Another night, and this was probably the biggest one, is this is without thinking. I mean, my wife and I, we have an incredible relationship.
Right.
And I rolled over, I grabbed her hair, and I kneed her in the face. I've been an MMA fighter for a long time. And fortunately, thank God, I hit her in the forehead. It knocked her, flipped her out of bed. And of course, she got up swinging a pillow and, hitting me. And what are you doing? And I knew that, man, this is bad, man. And I was taking a dozen different pharmaceutical drugs they were prescribing me for sleep, for pain, for anxiety, for depression, all this stuff, and nothing was working. And the straw that broke the camel's back is when, on a daily basis, I was not only thinking about suicide, but how I could do it and take care of my family at the same time, and they would get insurance money, and I could make it an accident, and nobody would ever know, and I began to seriously contemplate and rehearse, and it got to that point, and my wife called SOCOM, and called out to the unit, and that's when things started changing.
Well, I mean, it's first of all, I appreciate you being so honest. You know, it is hard. It is hard, and for those of you who've listened to out there, who've listened to some of my older episodes, you've heard me say, you know, like I said, I didn't have violent outbursts, but I had depression. I had manic episodes where I didn't know what was going on, where I'd be up in the middle of the night walking around checking the perimeter, so to speak. I mean, all night long. I had sleep issues. And a lot of this stuff, you know, much like Josh, I could attribute maybe some of it to the medication. You know, as Josh said, I was on you know, psychotropic pharmaceuticals and painkillers and far too many. They were given to me with the best of intentions. So, you know, it was just me as a soft operator just saying, well, you know, yeah, there's some side effects, but I'll get through it. I can handle this. And not realizing that in the condition that we're in, we can't handle it. We do have some things that when we're injured, when we're not at our top, that we need a little bit of help with. I think a lot of us have this preconception that we are going to be that young 20 or young 30-year-old resilient individual for the rest of our lives, not realizing that the things we've been exposed to and the injuries that we have are far beyond just something as simple as a 30-mile road march or something as simple as being kept awake through 64 days of Ranger School. It's not the same, and I think one of our problems is one of our benefits is our self-confidence and knowing that we believe that we're going to be able to do anything. But it also, in cases like this, it sometimes can be a detriment. So I appreciate you opening up about that, and don't think that Josh is some kind of a isolated incident. This is something that is going on far more often than it's not. You know, me and him are not isolated stories.
And I've got to add something to that, Jeff, that's the medication was bad, and I would tell the doc, I'd go and I'd literally go, I feel like this stuff is playing Tetris with my brain, you know? I feel like I'm changing every night, you know? And because the pain meds wouldn't work quite as much as I wanted to and wouldn't take all the edge off of, then I, of course, began to add to that.
Yeah. And
that really began. I mean, you know, I would say when the doc would say, you know, so do you drink? Yes. So, you know, how much? I'd say, you know, one or two a night. They didn't know I was talking about bottles.
Yeah, right.
You know, and you know, when I look back and now knowing what I know, you know, that the pharmaceuticals were horrible. Adding alcohol, and you know, literally is kerosene on a fire.
Absolutely.
And sadly, it's a cultural norm with all of us. You know, nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might start talking about getting off the Percocets and stuff like that, but man, don't talk about my beer.
Right.
You know, or don't talk about my Jack Daniels or, you know, whatever it is, my poison. And it's a tough one, man. It's a tough one.
I think we're moving in the right direction as a community with guys like yourself and myself coming out and speaking about this stuff. It does give guys it gives them a little bit of permission to open up a little bit and to realize that we're not the supermen all the time, that we're not as good as we think we are when it comes to dealing with ourselves, even though we're great at dealing with outside situations. I think it's something that we're moving towards, and you know, not to say that we can't deal with this stuff, but when we're injured, that's when things seem to be bad. We'll be right back to our interview and our guest after these words.
Welcome to Inside the G-Base Podcast, a conversation with Green Berets. We are not Navy SEALs.
I've come to get my boy.
Your boy?
I recruited him, I trained him, I commanded him in Vietnam for 3 years. I'd say that makes him mine. You don't seem to want to accept the fact that you're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare. With a man who's the best. With guns, with knives, with his bare hands. A man who's been trained to ignore pain, ignore weather, to live off the land, to eat things and to make a billy goat puke.
Our government
I'm Jay.
is united in its determination to take all
I'm D.
measures in support of freedom.
Every minute I stay in this room, I get weaker
Charlie squats in the bush, he gets stronger. Everyone gets everything he wants. I wanted a mission. And for my sins, they gave me one. Brought it up to me like room service.
Our mission is to bring you inside the guerrilla base and teach you how to think like the quiet professionals. In the G-Base is where we discuss philosophy, current events, unconventional warfare, politics, social movement theory, counterterrorism, and how it affects you.
Plus, we tell a few good war stories. Join the conversation at InsideTheGBase.com, on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to the G-Base podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, CastBox, Google Music, and your favorite podcast player.
So your wife called SOCOM. They got involved, and then was it then that you got teamed up with Task Force Dagger?
Yeah, well, it kind of all at the same time. They literally kind of led me down to the plan was get me down to Tampa, Florida, to the Polytrauma Center at the James A. Haley, which covers lots of different. When you got TBI, PTSD, it's polytrauma, it's all amputations, all the other things, and where they were going to see me, where they were going to bring me in, and so. Of course, I wasn't going to go, and so literally, I mean, it was kind of like a bottle of, some great vintage wine on a stick out in front of me. They led me down to Tampa, and got me in there. We talked for about a week. They did a intro for about a week with some initial testing, and they said, we really believe you need to stay here. It's up to you, and. Of course, my wife is crying in the corner. She's bawling and sobbing, and the first thing they said is, understand that if you stay here, there's no drinking. We're going to redo all the meds, and I said, okay, I want to do it. Excuse me. And they said, great. Well, we need 3 goals while you're here, and I said that's pretty easy. I want you to fix my cognitive function. I want you to fix my pain. And I want off all these meds, all of them. And that's how we started.
That's some big goals.
It was big. And I think they were it set them back a little bit and I went off all the meds, because, I watched a lot of guys go through there while I was there. I was there for 3+ months and inpatient, and I watched guys come and go, and I watched guys on a lot of meds, and they were not going to give them up. Yeah. I mean, that was it was very evident, and nobody talked about it, but it was sort of like, wow, a lot of drugs.
Yeah. In the attempts for the medical profession to really feel like they're being empathetic towards us, it's kind of landslid into not realizing as an outsider to the soft community that we don't do things 10% as soft guys. Everything is 100% to 130% of everything, and that includes self-destructive behavior. And so we get into this stuff. It makes us feel a little bit normal at first. It takes that, like you said, takes the edge off that pain. God, I can go to the gym. I can do a full workout again. I can get up in the morning and I can go to work and I'm not in massive pain when I get out of the car when I get to work and all these things. And then it's just like you said, it's the same thing. It's then after a while, 1 or 2 Percocets isn't doing it anymore. So I'm gonna up it on my own, which a lot of us are guilty of, and we just keep going up and up and up. And then when it gets to the point where it's a crutch, for those of you who've never been on a lot of those opiate type pain meds, there's nothing worse than coming off them. I mean, it is terrible. It makes me watch movies and see like heroin addicts and them go through withdrawals. And I'm like, I get it. Cause it's horrible.
And I've got the horror story from hell because they immediately threw me in the ICU and I'm going, look guys, I had businesses there in Fayetteville, and then I had this I don't know which was the hobby, the business or the contracting, because
Right.
then I'd go overseas for however long. And of course, over there, we're not drinking, doesn't matter what contract or where you're at, you're just not, you're doing the professional thing. And so I would always say, of course, I don't have a problem, because I can leave for a month and not and drink O'Doul's,
Yeah, right.
and be happy. And so I get into, they put me in the ICU. And everything goes, of course, cold turkey, and they put me on a drip of, whatever they're gonna take care of me with. But it's the VA, man, and the VA has always got a special way of doing things, and it was not intended. But in the bed next to me, literally this guy was in his 90s. He had just had some major surgery, and he was about to be placed on hospice, and so. I mean, it was the death ward.
Yeah.
And because it was the only place they had for me at the time. And so I laid there. I mean, all night long, this guy would scream and moan. And it was pretty unbelievable as I myself am kind of going through these withdrawals and this, this kind of torture. So I stayed in there for about, 3.5 days, and finally the doc came in and literally read him the guy was incoherent, but he read him his, well, we're going to, you're on hospice and you don't have long to live. And I'm thinking they have put me next to somebody who's dead, who's dying.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that, and especially as I'm going through all this detox, but as soon as made it very memorable. And as soon as I was out of there, of course, it was, on the road to success.
Fantastic. So how long? So you said you were in there. You said 4 months, 3 months, 3.5 months.
About 3.5 months, yeah.
And how were you as far as your recovery when you came out of inpatient?
Yeah, so I went through lots of TBI stuff, lots of vestibular stuff, like you found. They found damage, about 80% damage in both ears. I had already had a couple surgeries for diplopia, for nerve damage in my eyes, for double vision. But they finally gave me some good corrective lenses that corrected, all the angles that I was seeing. And my neck, began to work on my neck, getting fused. We did probably over the next few months had 6 surgeries, also that were just like, wow, I don't know if you realize this, but this is broken. We can fix this,
Right.
and I'm just driving on with. And so I also did the prolonged exposure for PTSD, and that was a good experience. And I got out and kind of for the next 6 months was recovering from surgeries and was still doing a few outpatient, but maybe for about the next year. But there was a moment while I was in there, and I was just kind of looking around, and at the time it was where the polytrauma center guys were at. There was a geriatric ward also. The polytrauma guys were over in the geriatric ward. So you had all these Vietnam vets and Korean War vets, and a lot of amputees and it really looked like straight out of MASH.
Right.
And it was very. I just, I was shaking my head. I'm like, I guess I was 45. I'm 45 years old. I'm in a VA hospital. This is like straight out of a nightmare.
Yeah, right. It's like all your nightmares come to, all of a sudden I'm Lieutenant Dan.
Exactly. And like, how did I get here and what is going to go on and what's the rest of my life? And you got these doctors that are, they're all doing this really great stuff, but basically they're just assigning you the next drugs that you're going to be on for the rest of your life. And this, they're going to have this piece of metal put here and this replacement for that. And so I really was kind of going, this is hopeless. And I just remember sitting in the bed one night and going, I've got to get my life back. I kind of looked, just looked beyond the walls, and I said, man, I've been successful at most things I put my mind to, even if that meant, having to go back once or twice.
Yeah.
A couple of recycles, doesn't matter. The bottom line is, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to return I'm going to get myself back, and this is not the end. And so it was kind of there that I said, I'm going to do something. I got to do something epic. I got to do something big. and I got to do it without all these drugs, and I got to do it to make a difference for all these other guys that are struggling.
Is that where the idea for Operation Phoenix spawned itself from?
Yeah, absolutely. And basically this all occurred after we went on a rec therapy event, and they had stand-up paddleboards, and I'd never done that, and I thought, yeah, right, I'm not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, right.
And I'm already having trouble with my balance, and so I stood on the board, and I'm an athletic guy, which is one of the things the PTs would have trouble with, is basically I could jump up on a ball like a basketball and balance on a basketball, but then have trouble walking a line.
Right.
And so I get on this paddleboard, and literally it's like, I mean, I've had this condition for a long time, and literally it's like coming out of a dark dungeon after 10 years of the lights being off, and all of a sudden the lights come on. So the horizon just goes flat, rock solid, concrete. Like I could feel my feet moving on the water, on this board, balancing on the board, but everything around me has suddenly stopped moving. And it is so stark contrast that it's just shocking. So I'm standing there taking it in. I paddle around. I come back. I tell the PTs what happened. And they said, well, great, buy a paddleboard. And then I told the other docs what happened. And they said, hey, great, why don't you move on to a boat, live on a boat? And we eventually did. For that movement. And then one of them finally discovered, after found some studies related to like sailors that have a movement disorder related to their sea legs never go away,
Right.
So, and that's that vestibular thing, so that helped to stop the movement. And that's where, and at first I wanted to paddle, I wanted to row a rowboat around the world. I wanted to do something epic.
Yeah.
These guys are rowing oceans, but for some reason they all stop after just one. I'm like, what's up with that? So I could do 2 or 3 maybe. And then a friend of mine said, why don't you do something a little more down to earth, Josh? Get your legs back. Start back slow. Paddle a lake or something like that. So that's when I decided, well, I'll just paddle from Texas to New York City.
Yeah, no big deal. No big deal, Josh. You're just gonna paddle from what was it, Galveston, I think, to
Corpus Christi.
Yeah, Corpus Christi.
Yep.
No big deal. It's
Yep.
it's a weekend. It's a weekend paddle. It should be no big deal.
Yep.
I
just stop and camp along the way.
Yeah, I first saw that. I first saw the news footage of your attempt to do this, and I was like, pardon my French, everyone. I was like, you fucking insane. I say that's a long way to go, but God, you did it though. Tell us about the journey of doing it.
Yeah, so this was called Operation Phoenix, and it was sort of going to be like the rising from the ashes. And it literally began with I'm going to Texas, I'm getting on a paddleboard, and I'm going to start paddling. I'm going to pack some bags. So next thing you know, just some people started chipping in. We got a board sponsor with Boat. They were awesome. Corey there is the CEO, is an amazing supporter of veterans. He's there in Fort Walton Beach. And so they gave me a couple boards and said, go at it. And that was the initial plan. And then some people began to get a hold of, the craziness, like what? And one of those was Task Force Dagger. And Task Force Dagger had helped Tanya kind of get back and forth to visit me in Tampa, and kind of helped us there because we started going through, of course, through some financial hardship, with everything going on. And so the next thing you know, I'm like, look, man, this is happening. I'm getting on a board and I'm going to start paddling and we'll figure it out. And so next thing you know, sponsors just started going, let's do this. I got to tell you, the first 3 days, that was the biggest, I don't know if I could do this.
Yeah. So was it because it was just overwhelming the event itself, or did you do any train up?
I was training very hard, but consider that I'd only been on a paddleboard, on a stand-up paddleboard for about nine months, maybe less than a year, and I was recovering from a lot of these surgeries as well. I had several. I don't know what the whole, everything that was related to it, but it was mainly with the traumatic brain injury. I could go out and I couldn't run a quarter mile.
Right.
Yep. Running, my PT test in the military was typically and it was always 300, but I could always run really, really well. And I would max everything, of course. But now, if I ran a mile, if I walked a mile, I'd be exhausted for a week. So I'd go out and I'd paddle 500 meters out, and I'd be lucky to make it back to shore. And then I would lose my voice. I'd be literally down and out for like 3 days, 4 days. I mean, just, and my wife is just, she's in tears throughout this whole thing. It's going, you're killing yourself. She's calling people, and people just started coming out of the woodwork to help. Some doctors began volunteering. Well, what's he doing? Elijah Segra, Dr. Eric Goodman, I'm working with now. There's several docs that began to do so much for us, in terms of how do we resuscitate this guy because he wants to live,
right?
And I think that was the biggest thing is they saw me crawling for the door, crawling out to the water, crawling my way, and they said, we got to give him a chance. And that's how it began. And next thing you know, I finally got trained up enough. I could do about 20 miles with my gear on the board. And but I started out with way too much gear on the board, started out with 2 other professional paddlers, and the weather was as bad as it was going to get for the next month. I mean, it was a horrible season. We had hurricanes, we had floods, that we were going through. And the first guy quit the first day, and the other guy quit the second day. It was basically like, brother, they were civilian guys, and I love them.
Yeah.
And it was awesome that they started this thing with me. But, I love you, brother, but I really got to get home now. Like, you were going all the way to Galveston with me. What happened? And so there was just a point in time where I was out on Corpus Christi Bay. I hadn't done enough research to know that some windsurfing championships are done there every year. It's just really such a windy bay. And so this is March. I've got the wind at my back, and I'm having my first good day, but the swells are like, next thing you know, I'm dipping down into the bottom, and I can't see over the top of the wave in front of me. And I'm coming up on top, and it looks like a mountain range, and I'm coming down. I'm trying to capture it on GoPro, and I'm like, this is awesome, man. I finally hear my phone. My phone is just blowing up, and I look, and the Coast Guard's following me, and they're tracking me, and the Coast Guard, and I've got like 50 text messages. Collins, get off the water now. Gale force winds. Look around. There's no other boats. And I was about 2 miles off, so I finally got in. I had to wait the next day, but it was at that point. I think the video on day 3 just said, I don't think this can be done. I had gone, my plan was to go initially 20, 30 miles a day, working my way up to 40 miles a day, which was almost my average at the end. And I had gone a total of about 20 miles in the first 3 days. And I was like, this ain't going to happen. This is going to be an epic failure.
So then what happened next?
I kept going.
That's always the best part of stories about guys like us is so when you hit that point, what happened? Oh, I just kept going.
Yeah, there was one paddle stroke after the next. Sometimes it was yard by yard. But about 30 days, after about 30 days, I was reaching Florida. Looking at Alabama, Florida, and I guess it was about 32, 33, day 33, and the paddle started sliding through the water a little easier. My back didn't feel like, I had stakes in it, my shoulders didn't feel like it was just impaled with railroad spikes.
Right.
My hands began to not feel like they were broken, or I had broken glass on the paddle, on the handle. Things started moving, and it just took one paddle stroke at a time through that point. And that's when I realized there was also something very important that happened. And that was, I began to realize that, and I saw this began a little bit in Texas, but really Louisiana, and then into Alabama and Florida. Every day boats would come out, or somebody would come out on the water. And this was everything. And I think, of course, I was on the news, a lot, But next thing you know, these people are coming out and they'd come, racing up. Hey, Josh, we're following you. And I go, wow, great, awesome. Is there anything you need today? They would say. And I heard that again and again. Is there anything you need today? Of course, I'd always say water. I always needed water. And, so they give me some water. We talk a little bit and they'd pull up alongside me while I paddled, or they'd paddle with me if they came out on a paddleboard. And it hit me then that if the 20-some million veterans today in society got a call, once a week, once a month from people who cared, if the 330 million people in this nation called a veteran once a month, that means every veteran would get a call every day based on that ratio. And no one kills themselves with suicide notes that says, I'm just sick of all these people that care about me so much. And so it's, that's where the connection is the cure came from for this next thing. That's where I said, I can't fail. They're not going to let me fail. And they didn't. I was literally, from that point on, I was passed along there were some Rangers that came out and spent days with me.
Yeah. Just
in a motorboat, just motoring beside me, drinking beer and making smart ass cracks.
That's Rangers do. That's what Rangers are for.
Yeah, it was beautiful, man. Yeah. Just talking about how slow I was going, and it was, this was it, man. Connection is the cure. I knew I could make it.
Well, I mean, it definitely was. How long did the entire trip take you?
The entire trip took 5 months. I spent a total of, I think it was about 120 paddle days. So there's a lot of time that, when either the weather was too bad, or there was some, I went across some bays that, some large openings, 10, 20, 30 miles that, might get caught in the middle. I got pulled out once or twice, for getting in over my head, so to speak. And then I'd go to the other side. It's like I wasn't going for a world record, so I didn't have to do every inch.
Right.
But we did, I did a total of 2,640 some miles. And that was enough. The big thing was we were having rallies about every week or 2 weeks. And those were about anywhere from 300 to 500 miles apart. And so I would have to paddle hard to get to the next rally. And that was the big thing, is that we made those rallies and continued on from there.
And you raised quite a bit of you did raise money during this also? Was that part
we did.
Yeah. That was a pretty big accomplishment. Why don't you tell everybody how much money you raised for the guys you're raising money for?
All right. So the Task Force Dagger Foundation, again, I always say, it was the organization that was there for me and my family in our darkest hour. And they support all of SOCOM units. We raised about $250,000 for that organization. And, it's phenomenal. They have incredibly low overhead. Keith and Colleen, David are just phenomenal people. And, they really believe in what they're doing. And so we're so happy to support them.
They've been on, and I've talked about them multiple times on my show. I can't say enough about Task Force Dagger and what they do, what they have done in the past for people, and what they continue to do. So, I mean, they really are. They're doing God's work, if I could be so bold as to say that. And I really do appreciate, as do a lot of veterans, everything they do. I've had Jeff Dardia on the show. I've known him for years. He's a big part of that with his initiative that he does with them. You sat down, you and I talked earlier today, and we talked about sitting down with NFL players, making connections about stuff like that. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about what kind of connections and what kind of work have you been doing with the NFL players that you sat down and talked with?
Right. So after I was I'd been out of the hospital for about 3-6 months, and I'm trying to figure out, what's next, and I'm researching all this and what about the NFL players, their chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and coincidentally, that was at one point a neurologist diagnosed me with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and it was kind of funny because it was like, what's that, and at the time, so this is like 2006, and basically what he was 2011, 2012, and basically what he was doing is he was putting all these pieces together. Okay, lots of brain damage and hits all the personality behavior stuff, all the, and he said, yeah, this guy's got brain damage. So, but that was fun. How I found out about CTE was I said, what the hell is encephalopathy? He looked at me and he said, brain damage. And I said, whoa, what? No, hold on. Whoa. And it's different when you call it something like that,
right, Right.
And so, of course, we used to call it post-concussive syndrome and repetitive concussive syndrome. And those were things that we could all digest and we knew what was going on. Now there's still a lot of question about, the terminology and what we're doing. So these football players, they haven't been to combat, but they're having all the same signs and symptoms of guys with PTSD. And then they're ending up killing themselves in strange and bizarre ways. And I totally could relate.
Right.
In terms of it made perfect sense. It made perfect sense to put this beast down, but at the same time to care for your loved ones and do it in a way that made sense and maybe even leave your brain to research to also help others.
Right.
So you'll take a shotgun to the chest.
Yeah.
Or drink some radiator fluid, and so that's when like part of the brain is working, but then there's a part of the brain that's just, that's definitely not working. And what is that? Well, that's brain damage. And so I began to seek out, I tried to get in touch with Dr. Ann McGee, who was at Boston University, who was one of the doctors who discovered CTE for that movie Concussion.
Yes. Yeah. And
she got me in touch with some other folks and began to try to get me some help as well. And I just kind of stayed in contact with that group. And so now when we look to do this next thing, and we wanted to make it, bigger, better, because, in order to raise awareness, I realized that you could just paddle a paddleboard slowly and talk about it. Nobody is going to watch or care unless you're just so brilliant. You can entertain people with your words. But basically, I'd have to find, a way to keep their attention. I needed to find sharks. I needed to find storms to go through, lightning bolts striking next to, and that kept people's attention. And then with that, with that awareness, it was just all about numbers. And so we've got more nonprofits involved and an executive producer, a guy, basically very, very wealthy guy entrepreneur out of Texas said, what do you want to do, man? He's all for our veterans. He's got a son that's now a Ranger, and he said, "What do you want to do, man? We're going to make a movie about it, and we're going to tell this story." And so I went to find the most dangerous thing I could find. The dangerous body of water was the race to Alaska. That inner passage is just treacherous, And on top of the water being treacherous and 24 tidal changes and 14 knot currents and killer whales and sharks and bears, but it's cold.
Yeah.
And that's like the super great equalizer. Hypothermia is knocking at the door. And so, hey, nobody had done it on a stand-up paddleboard last year. And so I went and we filmed the trailer, and then with the intent of making the movie all this year and doing the race this year. And a guy named Carl Kruger, he's awesome. He's from up there. He had attempted it twice, and on his third time he made it. And so God bless him, man. He paved the way. He was the pioneer to Alaska on a stand-up paddleboard. And so and now he's in my corner. And he'll be one of my coaches rooting for me on this one.
So where are we at? I know you said you did the trailer, and I'll have links to that, guys, in the show notes page. All the stuff that Josh has done is going to be linked in the show notes page. Where are you at? What's the next step?
Yeah, so this is called Operation Torrent. And a torrent is a violent rush, an overwhelming rush of water or emotion. And basically, this is what every veteran might feel after service and after combat. When they get out, they're going to do bigger and better things, and they get overwhelmed. And so they just got to know that they're not really alone. It's one paddle stroke at a time. You might not even see the shore that you're paddling to, but just keep on going, and you're going to get there. And there's people that are going to help. The connection is the cure. There are so many, even though you can't see them, there's so many people that want to help. And that's what we're doing, is we're connecting any veteran that needs help with many of these groups that I'm supporting to get the assistance that they need. My website is operationtorrent.com. And of course, we're on Facebook. And I'm trying to, we're 70 days out now. I'm training very, very hard. And basically, I'm trying to do a video every day. And if I can't do a video every day, I'm posting, kind of what I'm doing and what thing is helping me.
Yeah.
At that moment. Because it's a big daunting task, and I've got a lot of things to overcome in doing this. It's not, the race to Alaska, you are out there on your own. There's no support. There's no motors. There's, you have to find water. There's stretches of 300, 400 miles with nobody.
Wow.
You might not see another boat for days at a time. And so it's a very, very dangerous and austere race. So you got to be spot on with your navigation. You're going to be sleep deprived. You're going to be worn out. And so kind of putting everything that I've ever done in my life together, for this one. And that's exactly what Carl Kruger said who did it. He said this was, he's about 40 as well. And he just said, man, I get it. This was the culmination of my life.
Yeah.
That's an enormous statement.
That is an enormous statement
for someone to make.
Right.
This last 15 days, I think he did it in 15 days, was that hard. And so that's what I'm preparing for.
It really is the whole story, just to this point, Josh, is really a testament to your character and your drive to not only help yourself get better on your road, but your selfless acts to help others. And I want to make it clear that what you're doing is absolutely inspiring. And there are guys out there who watch and follow. And if it's at all in my control, there's going to be a lot more people that know about what you're doing. That guys like you and I are definitely on the same team as far as getting awareness out there and letting people know, like you said, letting people know they're not alone. That there's people out there that want to help them. It wasn't easy for guys like me and Josh when we felt like we were alone to get help, but we weren't even alone then. We had families that really stuck by us, and I want to say that I recognize, as I'm sure Josh does, that my family's, their tolerance of me at my worst and their caring for me is what helped me get better, because they were recognizing that we weren't ourselves, and now we're getting back to being ourselves. So what you're doing is fantastic, and it really is something that's worth being celebrated and being promoted and getting out there. And I am going to start pushing your videos, and all the stuff that you share is going to be shared straight onto the Changing Hearts and Minds Facebook page and site. And this episode, generally my episodes release on Wednesday, but this episode's going to come out this Sunday, and the reason why it's going to come out this Sunday is because I'm gonna spend the next couple days editing this, putting it together, and getting it out there. So because this feels like one of the most important episodes that I've done, only because every single word that comes out of your mouth, it just strikes a chord with me, because I've been in the same places you've been.
Right.
And it's just funny how sometimes we find some similarities between our own experiences. And yes, me and Josh both come from the same world, but we not necessarily everyone's injuries are the same. So it is odd to find someone that's got almost so many of the same things going on. So I do appreciate what you're doing, brother. I appreciate all the work that you put into it. I think you should be proud of the steps you've taken. Definitely there are lives out there that have been changed by you already. I know that for a fact. You and I did not connect to each other because we sought each other out. You and I both know that somebody else connected you and I together because they saw the similarities in the Fed. If you and I weren't making differences in people's lives, we probably nobody would have been like, hey, you need to talk to Josh. Let me get Josh to contact you to get him on the show. And like I said, I knew who you were, but I'm glad they did, because this is something I can 100% get behind, as well as the rest of the guys at the Change Your POV podcast network are going to get behind this. Josh, I want to thank you, man, for coming on. I know you got a very busy day that you got going on. You guys, so it took me and Josh, 2 weeks? 2 weeks of, I'll call you today. And then we would both get tied up in our stuff, and I'll call you again tomorrow. Finally today, I think Josh made a good call. When me and him talked earlier this morning, I was like, hey, let's get this recorded. He's like, well, let's do it today. I think because he and I both know that me and him are so busy that sometimes if we don't do it now when the iron's hot, then things may slip.
Stop.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it was a good call. Again, thanks for coming on the show, and I'll make sure everyone knows about it. I'm going to leave you with any last words you want to put out there, and try to think about you talking directly to those guys who need to hear it.
First of all, again, thank you so much for the opportunity. I feel like this is so much bigger than me. I feel like in May of, I guess it was 2014, when I went to the hospital, I really feel like that was it. I feel like I died, after that, it was dead man walking, for quite some time. And that what came out of there was just had no ego, and just had a mission to help guys. And what I see is, the guys that are still in today, there was in March of about 2002, we got a crew of new Rippies, new privates, and there was about 6 or 8 of them. And you looked across, and these guys were not your average bunch, man. I mean, I think all of them were like 6 foot, 6'2", 6'3", and I just looked across, and I was like, what in the world, man? And so, lieutenants usually aren't involved in that process at all. And I was a butter bar lieutenant there in 1st Ranger Battalion. And so, but I always injected myself being a prior enlisted guy. So I went over and I had to ask them, where you from? When'd you enlist? And all of them to a T had enlisted right after 9/11. All of them were like, college athletes, or they were just like, it was the cream of the crop. It was just America's finest, It was these corn-fed guys from Idaho, man, that were just boom, they're just rock solid. We got a couple of them in our platoon. And my point is this: those guys enlisted to do the job, and take care of America. In a couple years from now, those are the guys who are going to be retiring. And they need us. And those guys don't have, 7 rotations like I do. They have 17 or 27.
Right.
Or more rotations into combat. And, man, we cannot give up this mantra. We can't drop this guide on. We have to continue the charge, because more than anything, over the next few years, they're going to need us for the long haul. So you guys that are still out there doing it, man, we're doing it for you. And, we love you. Keep up the good fight, man. Stay in the fight. And we're here for you when you get out.
I want to thank all the listeners for checking us out. And you're going to be able to find me on my page. You'll be able to find all the links to find Josh and follow him. And much like all my other guests that I really identify with, you will see Josh and his journey echoed on my Facebook page and on my website. So thank you, Josh, for coming out today. And everyone else out there, make sure you guys are living your life the way you want to live your life. Don't let anybody tell you that you cannot do anything. You are in complete control of everything in your life. Only one that's going to tell you no is you. Don't oppress your mind. Don't tell yourself you can't do something. Believe in yourself. Be oppressed with a bear. We'll talk to you guys later.
Change your POV, and all of its shows can help and heal and even educate. We want you to help us help others. Visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/changeyourpov. Become a patron of our network and our mission.